representatives to vote against the continuing resolution. That was that authorization for the government to spend money for another 2 weeks. Why did you, tell us why, of course you know I agree with you, but tell us why you defied the leadership of your own party and did that.
We had just spent 90 hours debating other cuts. And like you said, and that was only getting to $61 billion. We had fought hard, we had got those in, and then to turn around and say 2 weeks later, we're not sure the Democrats in the Senate have had enough time, so let's give them 2 more weeks. My gosh, we've been debating it for 90 hours. They easily knew what was in that bill, and I know our leadership keeps saying the most important thing for America is to see that we're all together, all voting together. And I'm going, no, they need to see that we're serious about reining in this massive debt. And by the way, it's interesting, the juxtaposition, Judge, but for so many years, liberals beat up on conservatives because we were trying to be disciplined. Now we're on the side of the children.
Right.
We're the ones that are trying to save the children and the grandchildren from this mantle of debt that we should never be putting on them.
You know,
and by the way,
a lot of young people watch this show. A lot of young people are libertarians. The generation coming of age simply will not accept business as usual. When the leadership of the Republican Party, not you and Ron Paul and Michelle Bachmann and the others whose names are now escaping me because you resisted the leadership, but when the leadership of the Republican Party says business as usual, what does that say to the generation of young people coming of age watching this nonsense?
That's right. I hear a lot of people disheartened. Now, I voted because I thought it was the wrong thing to do. You're getting ready to negotiate further, and you just pulled off the table all these things you fought for. But let's say for those who didn't even believe, as most of us, you and I believe, that we've got to rein this stuff in, from a tactical standpoint, this business of making sure all Republicans vote the same way, we're all united, you know, think about it. Speaker goes in to talk to Harry Reid. Harry Reid says, hey, you can see my guys are all over. I can't give any more on this. But you guys, you all vote lockstep together. You can give all you want to because your guys will always give in. They need to understand we're not the enemy of the Republican leadership. We're their friends, and if they'll let us, we can help them get on the right track.
I have asked almost every Republican member of the House of Representatives who's come on here, and I think I've asked you this before, maybe your answer will be the same or differently. Does Speaker Boehner recognize that he would be Minority Leader Boehner were it not for the Tea Party, were it not for the attitude that the government has to spend less and stop borrowing now? And if he does not recognize that, is he doomed? And if he does recognize that, is he willing to allow the government to be shut down to demonstrate to the American public that small government people in the Congress mean what they say?
Judge, the answer honestly is, I don't know. I don't know. They say that they get it. They say that they know. But the truth is, you know, if they will just stand up, these people will come in behind him and it'll be a new burst of strength like he hadn't seen before. But in the meantime, you know, we get treated as the outsiders, the crazies, the Tea Party crazies. And actually, this is mainstream America that's really concerned about the debt and the spending.
All right. What do you think happens if the government does shut down? I think the Tea Party attitude in the country is so prevalent that this time the Democrats and the White House will get blamed, unlike 1995 when the Republicans got blamed.
I think you're right, Judge, and the fact is we truly are on the side of the children and the grandchildren, trying to avoid the irresponsible position of just loading them down with debt. We're in the moral right here, and I think we should stand our ground. But I know back in our Republican retreat, we had speaker after speaker say, you know, just you don't want to shut down the government. You don't want to vote no on the deficit increase, so there were some Texans that had a meeting, a small meeting, and I'd run up to my room and had Fox on in the room naturally. And somebody was saying, you know, polls out, 71% of Americans don't care if the government shuts down, whatever, just quit spending. And I told that to the other Texans, and one of them said, well, the other 29% that doesn't agree, they're in there talking to our I retreat.
Got it. Congressman Gohmert, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
It's always good to talk to you, Judge. Thank you.
Gas prices have been climbing for 3 straight weeks. Now the national average is topping $3.50 a gallon. That's almost 40 cents more than a month ago and about 75 cents higher than a year ago. And with the nation nearing the summer driving season, gas prices are expected to increase even more. And my next guest says the president's energy policies are making the situation even worse. Joining me now is Republican Wyoming Senator and physician John Barrasso. Senator, Dr. Barrasso, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thanks so much, Judge. Appreciate it.
What do we do about the president's policies, like interfering with drilling in the Gulf of Mexico to the point where a federal judge has to hold some of the president's own people in contempt of court for not following the judge's orders?
Well, you know, you're absolutely right. People are feeling the pain at the pump at home all across this country. Families are feeling it. And yet this administration is ignoring the cries of the American people to the point that the Secretary of Energy, Secretary Chu, has previously said that what we need to do is get gasoline prices up to the levels that they are in Europe. And when he said it, it was about $8 a gallon. So it's completely irresponsible. And what we're doing is spending millions and millions of dollars and sending that money overseas to people who want to blow us up instead of doing what you know we should do, which is exploring for energy offshore, on federal land, and exploring in Alaska.
Why is it so difficult to do that? I mean, the argument you make, Senator, is so logical, so compelling. It's an argument that everybody can understand. Is the president or the Democrats ideologues? Are they utterly and almost like zealots opposed to the idea of drilling? Do they not see the clear-sighted wisdom of allowing people to drill in areas where no environment will be harmed?
Well, and those are American jobs and American dollars which should come into our economy, not to help go overseas to other places. But you look at what the Environmental Protection Agency does with so many rules and regulations and red tape, make it almost impossible. When the president came in, his Secretary of the Interior, 77 drilling exploration opportunities, took them right off the table. What happened in the Gulf of Mexico? You know, the Russians can drill, but we can't. And now the New York Times today said, you know, who's really benefiting from this increase in energy costs at our expense? The Russians. They're the ones that are making out like bandits.
Here's an argument you might want to make to the president the next time you guys sit across a table. The poor and the middle class are hurt very, very heavily by the rise in gas prices. They do not have the expendable income that allows them to pay that additional money every time they fill up the tank. The Federal Reserve is causing all sorts of prices to go up. Now the president won't do anything that will let these oil prices go down. And then I would also argue it to the president, as soon as drilling is permitted, the price of oil will go down, even though it'll be years before that oil turns into gasoline, because the financial people and the speculators will know what's coming. Why doesn't he understand that?
Well, he refuses to accept the reality there. But you and I know that American families who have to live within their means, have to balance their budgets, are just trying to get the kids off to school and fed and clothed in the morning before they go off to work. And you know, you're talking about fill-ups, and now at $100 to fill up a pickup truck in Wyoming or a car. That is something that we can do and help our own economy by just allowing for exploration of energy in the Gulf, on federal lands, and in Alaska.
Before I let you go, Dr. Barrasso, I want you to wear your other hat. How's Obamacare working out so far?
Well, you know, this is now the anniversary of Nancy Pelosi's famous quote, "First you have to pass it before you get to find out what's in it." Over the last 12 months, the American people have found out what's in it. They found out that many of the president's promises have been broken. You can't keep your insurance if you like it. Even if you like it, the cost of insurance is going up instead of down. And across the board now, as of yesterday, there have been over 2.5 million waivers granted for people who don't want to live under Obamacare, and it's over 1,000 waivers for 2.5 million people. Almost a half of those waivers have been given to union employees. These are people that, in the first place, they're the ones that lobbied for passing of the bill. Now they say there's no way they want to live under.
Somehow, I'm not surprised. Senator John Barrasso, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Judge.
The White House says all options are on the table considering the violent crackdown in Libya on protesters, including U.S. troops on the ground in Libya. Boy, that could be another foreign policy disaster. Next. Libyan warplanes continue to pound rebels advancing toward the Libyan capital of Tripoli. This as Arizona Senator John McCain is pushing hard for a no-fly zone over Libya to prevent these kinds of attacks. And while Senator McCain is against putting U.S. troops on the ground there, the White House says all options are on the table. All options? What about just leaving Libya alone to sort out its own problems? With us now, Malo Innocent, Senior Foreign Policy Analyst with the Cato Institute. Malo, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thank you for having me.
What would it actually take for the American government to engage in a no-fly zone? I mean, how difficult, how expensive, how costly, how time-consuming would such a maneuver be?
Well, the first step to any sort of no-fly zone would be to attack the air defense systems within Libya. So that essentially means that we'd be attacking Libya. It won't necessarily be something where we'd be preventing the airplanes from operating in the north or in the south or even in the east. It would essentially be attacking an outright attack on Libya. And this comes on top of the operations and contingencies that we have in Yemen, in Somalia, in Pakistan, in Iraq, and Afghanistan. This would just add to the plethora of foreign policy and contingencies that we already have. And really, I think you brought up an excellent point in that why don't we just leave the Libyan people alone? Why don't we allow them to sort out their own affairs? And I think, unfortunately, when we get wrapped up in these discussions, it becomes psychologically satisfying for us to want to do something.
Right.
We can't mold and shape developments to our liking.
Right. I mean, and Gaddafi is an odd character. I mean, in 1986,
Absolutely.
Reagan bombed his home because of his support for terrorism. In 2003, Prime Minister Blair and then President Bush actually embraced him because he agreed to get rid of what we now know was some useless, almost worthless nuclear waste material that we thought he could somehow turn into a bomb. Now, of course, he's demonized, and rightly so, because he's killing his own people. But here's the big question. How do we decide who are our enemies and who are our friends? And why should the American government even consider trying to kill this guy or kill his troops or set him back irreparably?
I think that's a fantastic question. I think it depends on where U.S. interests are being served. And what's interesting is that we're talking about Libya, but no one's talking about the Ivory Coast. And for the past several months, they've been engaged in a very bloody and protracted struggle, political struggle. There are actually two parallel governments that are operating right now on the Ivory Coast. But no one's talking about intervening there. So it becomes a question of where do we decide to intervene? When do we not decide to intervene? And particularly in the case with Libya, I think in the short term it might be very, very well helpful to the rebels. But we also need to consider what it might do in the long term in terms of delegitimizing the rebel and the protest movements. And really, I think the moment we decide to intervene, it will be depriving the Libyan people of the ability to achieve freedom for themselves. But this is their revolution. It's not ours.
Wouldn't we actually harm their ability to achieve freedom for themselves? Don't they, for reasons not necessary to explore now, actually hate the U.S. more than they hate Gaddafi? Wouldn't this crystallize some people to support him who otherwise would be neutral or be adverse to him?
That is absolutely right. In fact, the interim council in the east of Libya, they've actually come out and said that they don't want U.S. intervention. They want to, again, they want to have this sort of catharsis. They want to be able to unseat the leader who's been ruling them for 40 years, that's been essentially calling them cockroaches and rats and actually encouraging his military to go house to house and hunting these people down. Again, when we sort of put our own lens onto the situation, we deprive the ability of Libyans to achieve freedom on their own in the way they see fit. And I think it becomes something of we want to sort of mold and shape reality in the outcome. And this is why you see people on the left and the right coming together and wanting to intervene. This is sort of the same contingency that we saw with Iraq, where you saw people on the left and the right joining together and wanting to intervene.
Right. Malo Innocent, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Union protests are still raging across the nation. This is a good thing, my next guest says, and it's not all about money. Coming up.